I wish I could play the piano like Dave Foley. I wish I had the amazing combination of great organizational talent and kind of a fun goofiness that Beth Jason has. I wish I was like Charlotte Stoughton, with a heart that sees every living person as a friend. I wish I was as accepting of every person as Dougie Shaw was. I wish I could sing the high notes like Katie Roberts. I wish I was as trim as Jennifer Delazana. I wish I had great hair like Karen Lowry. I wish I was as tall as Kay Simmons. Have you ever wished you were somebody else? Anybody ever done that? Have you ever wished you were somebody else? I think most of us have done that at one time or another. Some envy is not too hard to admit. I, for example, will admit to having cousin envy. I have 7 female first cousins, and they're all gorgeous. They're also tall. The short one among them is 5'7". 2 are 5'11", and everybody else is in between. I'm 5'2" if I stand up very, very straight. What's with that? How come I'm the only one on either side of the family who didn't get the tall gene? Yes, it's true that the grandmothers on both sides were more like me. Neither one of them was particularly tall. But why am I the only one that resembles them in that way? I have envied my cousins for a long time because of this. I was well into my 30s before I realized how silly that was, by the way. One of my gorgeous cousins started telling me how lucky I was. I'm like, really? Why? And she said, because you can go to the store and buy pants that are long enough. I can't do that. I have to get them made sometimes, she says. Well, okay. I have to get hems taken about this long, even on petites, but whatever. Another gorgeous cousin from the other side of the family told me how she looked up to me. I said, really? Because I think she's just about perfect in every way. And I said, why? And she said, because of your education. She said, you have 3 degrees. Wow, I could never do that, she said. Meanwhile, I had spent years admiring her because she slogged her way through her bachelor's degree while juggling a home and a child and a part-time job and also helping her husband keep the books for his business. I think she's amazing. Each of my cousins is very special, and I'm blessed to be related to them, but I'm not them, and God never intended me to be. Nor did God intend for them to be me. I have noticed that there's a gorgeous and accomplished women theme in my life. That seems to keep coming up. My last semester at seminary, I had the opportunity to attend a national gathering of clergywomen. This was in the early 80s, and there weren't too many clergywomen, and they were never a lot of them in one place, so it was just really exciting to go and to hear treble voices singing in a gathering of clergy. It was just a real thrill. 2 other women in my class last semester of seminary also attended. We shared a room together so we could save some money. One of them was someone that I had held in high regard, thought was just the neatest person since I had met her on the first day of school 3 years earlier. She was tall. Is that a theme for me? Maybe. Also smart, really smart, beautiful, and seemingly unflappable. She could handle everything, it seemed like to me, and not miss a beat. She had a strikingly lovely alto voice. I'm a soprano. Once again, I want to be something I'm not. She played the guitar beautifully. She had actually made a living for about 3 years before she went to seminary as a folk singer, traveling from place to place, doing concerts in churches and cafes and all kinds of places. She was just really neat. Early in our second semester of seminary, she gave birth to her first child, Eric. She never missed a beat even then. She kept her 4.0 perfect GPA intact. She maintained her church job doing youth work in a church. She hosted her in-laws from India in the 2-room, and I mean 2-room, not 2-bedroom, 2-room apartment that she shared with her graduate student husband and their newborn. And they still managed to eat, get food on the table and all of that. This woman was amazing, invincible. I was in awe of her. Why would she hang around with an average person like me? One night at that conference, we had gone back to our room. The evening activities were over, and our other roommate was from California, and she had gone off to see some friends from home, and so she wasn't there. And Beth and I got in our pajamas and got in bed and turned off the lights, and chatted for a while before we went to sleep. Somehow, in the dark, I was able to admit my insecurity and to tell her how I had been felt like I was following around in her shadow for 3 years. I wanted to be like her. I just thought she was just the neatest person ever. I admitted my insecurity to her and how I admired her, and you know what she did? She laughed. She, in the other bed, just was giggling merrily, and she laughed. She had no idea. And then she told me a couple of things that I didn't know. We had both had gone to the seminary a couple of months before it started in order to find work. We both applied for church jobs. It turned out we applied for the same church job, and it was both of our first choice, and I got that job. I had never known she'd even applied. We didn't apply on the same day. I had no idea. She said, "You have the church job that I wanted to get." Who knew? And then she told me about our experience of writing and defending the senior thesis, which at Drew was called The Theology of Ministry. It's like everything you know and everything you've learned in 3 years condensed into 25 pages. It's kind of a bear. You're in a group when you do that, a peer group, and you read each other's papers. We were in the same peer group. We had read each other's papers, and hers had required a major rewrite, and mine had not. I was just lucky, I think. I don't know, but that's what happened. And she talked about envying that I didn't have to go through all of that I had gotten closer the first time and only had to do minor rewrites. I had been envying this incredible woman for 3 years, and it turned out that there were some things going back the other way, and I had no idea. Isn't that interesting how it is, how we think about people? Envy is a waste of time and energy. I wasted a lot of time envying Beth. It's also a futile exercise because envy doesn't change anything. Except perhaps changing the person who envies, changing that person from someone who might be content to someone who is definitely discontent. We noted last week that sin often damages or destroys community, and that is certainly true of envy, because envy, by definition, is completely selfish. Envy is a selfish thing. It's all about me. Though we don't always articulate it so clearly, envy is not simply about me wanting to have what you have, like talking to the kids about me wanting to have these fishnet stockings, but it's also wanting me to have it instead of you. Because after all, I'm more deserving, right? I worked harder for it, I should have it, I'm a better person, whatever it is. I not only want to have what you have, I want to have it instead of you. Remember also that last week we noted that sin is always about God. It's about damaging our relationship with God by offending God. What could possibly be more offensive to God than to reject or be dissatisfied with the way that God made me, the way that God made you? I'm not offensive to God. I made you with love, and you don't like it? What's with that? So here are some things that I have not always understood. God loves short people. Newsflash, God loves short people. God loves people who don't have perfect GPAs. God loves people who don't play the piano well enough to play in public. God loves people who don't love perfectly, and so on. God is kind of indiscriminate in loving. Aren't you glad? A few minutes ago I said that some envy is easy to admit. We've been chuckling about my foibles, but I bet if you'd be willing to tell you some of yours, we could chuckle again, right, about whatever your particular issues are, who you've envied and why. Some things are tougher to admit, though, because they point out very clearly just how selfish envy is. The scriptures tell us to rejoice with those who rejoice and to weep with those who weep. Envy messes that up completely. When we envy someone, we weep with the one who rejoices. She didn't deserve that. After all, I did. And so she got something wonderful, and I weep about that. I'm not rejoicing with her. We rejoice with one who weeps. Well, he had it coming to him after all, didn't he? I know what kind of a person that guy really is. Envy of that kind surely destroys God's precious community. Today's gospel reading is about envy, isn't it? It's surely about that, the destruction of community too. Be honest, how many of you don't like the parable of the workers in the vineyard? How many really don't like that parable? A lot of people don't like that parable, yeah. I've been studying the Bible with Christians and other seekers for a long time, for a lot of years now, and I can't think of many people who do like that story. Some of you are pretending you kind of do, but I know the truth. Yeah. It's offensive to people in a whole lot of ways. But the one that I hear most often is, it's not fair. Yeah. That's illustrative of how far we are from understanding God's heart. Because God never promises us fairness. Read the Bible from the first page to the last, read it all, study all of it. God does not promise that life will be fair. What God does promise over and over again is that there will be grace, and the grace will be sufficient. Think about the parable for a minute. All of the workers that were out there that day had the same need. They needed to get a job, to be hired so they could earn enough to take care of their needs for the day. They all needed exactly the same thing. The owner of the vineyard understood that. The owner knew that. He remembered it. But isn't it amazing how quickly the workers forgot that they all had that common thing between them? They all needed a job for the day in order to meet their needs for the day. Hearers of parables, both in Jesus' time and today, listen to his teaching stories, and then unconsciously, I think, we locate ourselves in the story. We take on one of the characters in the story. The outrage that so many feel at the vineyard owner's actions of paying everybody the same only makes sense if we locate ourselves as one of the early arrivals. We were the first ones who were tired in the morning. We sweated all day. We worked hard in the middle of the day when it was hot and humid like it is here in Maryland in the summer. We were out there. We were picking fruit. We were working really hard. It only makes sense if we locate ourselves, our outrage, as early arrivals. But even then, it's still about grace and not fairness, isn't it? If you got there and you were working early, you got picked, right? You were one of the ones who was in there on the marketplace and got picked to go and work. Other people got left behind. Once again, not about fairness. Somebody else got left behind. We give fuel to the fire of envy when we spend more time looking around than looking at God. God has given to each of us a life. The pecking order that defines things for us, for many of us, is not God's creation. That's a human creation. God didn't plan it that way. God is all about grace, about giving what is needed for the day, every day, and again tomorrow when that is needed. Grace is not earned. Grace is given, even to those who are completely undeserving. Aren't you glad about that? The most telling part of the parable, I think, comes at the end. After paying all of the workers exactly the same living wage and seeing the dissension build between them and the murmuring begin, the vineyard owner asks the question, "Are you envious because I am generous?" Are you envious because I am generous? And the truth is that most of us would have to say yes. We've located ourselves in the parable and in life as those who are deserving of goodness, or at least fairness as we perceive it. Are we envious when someone else gets something we want, something we think we deserve, or something we think we've earned? You darn tootin' we are. Of course we're envious. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything. It could be a grade in school. It could be a job or a promotion or a salary or a title or a raise or whatever. We wonder, why her and not me? Why him? He isn't deserving, not like I am. If people really knew the truth, they would know that I'm the one who should be put up front. A few years ago, I was talking with a woman who said that she had a good sermon topic for me to work on. I'm always scared when people say that. Oh dear. She said, "I've got this great idea for you." I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" I knew her pretty well, and I knew what was going on in her family at the time. Finances were tight, lots of other challenges happening in the family. She and her husband had 3 children. The oldest had been a high school football prodigy and had just gone off to college. He had been heavily recruited. He had been given a full scholarship. This was wonderful because that was the way it was going to be affordable in that family for him to go to college, and they were very happy about it. Unfortunately, he wasn't handling it particularly well. He was dealing with depression. He was succumbing to a lot of peer pressure, a lot of just pressure in general to have been this highly recruited athlete, and could he measure up, and could he do the schoolwork, and so many things. It was just a hard time for him. He was hanging with the wrong crowd. Over Christmas break, his first year in college, he came home and he was hanging out with some young men from the gang that he was starting to connect with. They were up to no good, and one night they went out, and before the evening was over, though he wasn't killed, another young man was shot. Because he was well known, the son of the woman that I'm telling the story about was held up as an example as the court proceedings went on. He wasn't the shooter, but he was there, and he didn't stop anything from happening. His mother approached me and told me that lots of people had been approaching her with sympathy and saying, "Oh, poor you, why is this happening to you? You're a good person," they said to her. And that was true, absolutely true. She's a public health nurse. She spends all day, every day, trying to help people, trying to assist people who are having challenges in their life. She spends her free time raising money to build a clinic in her native country of Nigeria. Their point, she told me, was to have her ask, "Why me?" She should be asking God, she should be asking whoever, "Why me? Why is this happening to me?" And her suggestion to me with this idea for a sermon topic, she said, was to deal with a different question. Why not me? That was her question. Why not me? Should I wish this on somebody else? Should I wish the difficult things that are happening in our lives on somebody else? What kind of a Christian wish is that? Should I wish it on someone else? The deadly sin of envy would say, yes, something bad should go to someone else, not to us. When something good comes to us, it should be more than everybody else gets. Kind of like the workers in the vineyard, you know, we started early, we should get more. Something good comes to them, it should be even better for us. This woman's son was in jail, and she had many other challenges in her life, but she believed the promise of God. And God's promise is not for fairness, it's for grace. She believed that God's grace would come to her and that it would be sufficient for her need, even in such a difficult time. Envy makes us restless. It makes us dissatisfied. Envy has us looking around and comparing with others rather than looking at our own lives. Envy has us resenting what others have, resenting who others are. Envy ignores and discounts grace. Envy, though, does not have to be deadly. It does not have to be a terminal disease. We'd be so much better off if we'd look around less and look to God more, don't you think? We'd all be better off if we did it that way. St. Augustine penned a famous prayer a long time ago, and part of it reads like this. You may have heard it before. You have made us and drawn us to yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. You have made us and drawn us to yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. Envy causes restlessness, and restlessness leads us away from God. The antidote to envy, I believe, is contentment. Hear these words from 1 Timothy chapter 6. There is great gain in godliness combined with contentment, for we brought nothing into the world so that we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with these. This is a countercultural message, isn't it? Just like last week was a countercultural message about pride. Our culture does not encourage contentment. It encourages us always to strive for more, even if we've got everything we possibly need in droves and more than that. We always should be striving for more. That's what our culture says. With that ethos, is it any wonder that community suffers? Because our wanting more is at the expense of someone else. Amen. How can we love well when we always want what that person has, somebody else has? When we can't be thankful for the person getting something that we think ought to be ours?